Good evening, fight fans. Thanks for joining me tonight. Mark G here, 203 Fight Network, and we are going to give you the preview and predictions for tomorrow morning's UFC Fight Night 109, Gustafsson versus Teixeira, Stockholm, Sweden on Sunday, May 28th, 2017. The Ericsson Globe Arena in Stockholm, live on Fox Sports and on UFC Fight Pass. I got your prelims, I got your main event predictions coming up next. Hello once again. Thanks for joining me, fight fans. Like I'm Mark G here. And I just wanted to get a little bit more info. Sorry I'm a little late getting the preview and predictions out, but we still have tomorrow morning. I'm on the East Coast, so these fights will start for me around 9 a.m. That's to be on UFC Fight Pass. That's going to be Damir Hadzovic against Marcin Held, and then Jason Arayi against Darren Till. Darren Till, who missed weight, actually came in at 176, I believe. Pretty much, got to say, a little bit disappointed in that, but I'm also going to talk about real quick a little bit of Jermaine Durandamy came out today saying that she didn't want to fight Chris Cyborg Justino, the true 145-pound women's, women's best featherweight in the world, basically best women's fighter in the world. So came out and called her a cheater, said she didn't want to fight her. It was pretty obvious that after that fight, when she fought Holly Holm back in February, that, as soon as that question was brought up about Chris, she did not, she kind of totally avoided it. I don't think you're ever going to see those two fight. They'll probably have to end up stripping her of the belt before anything else, but we'll talk a little bit about that possibly as the show goes on. A couple more things, but definitely just here for the preview and predictions. Going to have that coming up next. We're going to start from the main, and we're going to work our way down. And we're going to see how that goes. I do have some predictions, like I said, some predictions on that. I'm going to give you those. I'm also going to go over my 205-pound rankings, which is a little bit different from the UFC's, and we'll get into that and why. And like I said, going to have that coming up. So stay tuned. All right. Sorry about that quick little break there in between. Just working out some of the kinks. Now, mainly here, what I really wanted to talk about first was these light heavyweight rankings. This is a pretty important fight tomorrow for this division, being that Anthony Johnson has stepped down, and he definitely could have put a lot of great fights. Put a lot more great fights on, but I'm just happy that he's found peace in what he's done, and if anything, really just owe Anthony a lot for what he's put in. But he's left a pretty big void in this division, so kind of wanted to get into it. The light heavyweight rankings and don't really make much sense if you look at UFC.com. In my opinion, they don't make much sense. I mean, obviously the top three you can't really go wrong. You have Gustafsson, Teixeira, Manawa. 1, 2, and 3, no doubt there. They also have Shogun, Mauricio, Hua as 4, and I can't disagree with that. I don't differ from those top 4. Daniel Cormier, obviously the champ. John Jones has not fought, suspended, drops out of those rankings. They obviously do a 15. I only usually rank up to 10. I think that 15 is kind of BS. This is where it gets a little interesting, in my opinion. Now, this is the UFC's top 10. UFC rankings done by, the MMA journalists of the world. I guess they're, supposedly. I'm not even going to go over who that is. But, so, like I said, we have Gustafsson, Teixeira, Manawa, Hua, okay? Then we got Ozdemir. Ozdemir, who just one fight in the UFC, and I would definitely have him in these top 10 because he's a beast. He's definitely a scary dude. And now he's fighting Misha Serkinov, tomorrow, who they have at number 7. In between that, they got Corey Anderson, who was just knocked out pretty brutally by Manawa, and is pretty young. St. Preux, who's lost like his last 3 out of 4, or 3 out of 4, I believe, at least. And I know one of those was to Jones and a couple other good fighters, but he still lost a few in a row. And, Ozdemir had a pretty good showing against him, even though it was I believe, unanimous decision. Anyway, so this is how they squeeze out from 7 through 10. 7 through 10 is Serkinov, St. Preux, Alir Latifi, and Rogerio Nogueira, Little Nog. Then they okay. Now that's their top 10. I'm not going to go over really their 15. I'll just tell you there's a couple guys in the 15, number 12 and number 15 who belong in the top 10 over Alir Latifi and Nogueira. All right. My rankings would go as follows. Like I said before, and I wanted to get into this before I get into the preview because this is a very important day tomorrow for the light heavyweight division. Being that you have 4 of the top 10, in my opinion, fighting in the main and in the co-main. So, if any of you are watching, leave something, leave in the comments, hit that like button if you're enjoying it so far. Trying to get some things out here. Sorry I didn't get this out earlier. Haven't been feeling too well. Just hopefully it's nothing serious. We'll see what happens. I think I just need to eat a little healthier. But this helps. Doing this helps, believe it or not, even though you're live, and that's supposed to be a little stressful. And it's been having chest pain since last night. But I digress. We move on. I don't want to talk about my health. I want to talk about these fights. So my top 10, like I said before, would be Gustafsson, Teixeira, Manawa, Hua, okay? But my number 5 would be Misha Serkinov. My number 6 would be Ozdemir. Volkan Ozdemir. Like I said, now you got 6 and 7. I'm sorry, 5 and 6. Number 7 I would have is Corey Anderson, Oven St. Preux at 8. Then I would have Tyson Pedro at 9 and Gustafsson Antigilov at 10. Actually, I'm sorry, Gustafsson Antigilov at 9, Tyson Pedro at 10. Rogerio and Latifi, in my opinion, drop out of the race. Neither of them, haven't fought. Nogueira, I don't think Nogueira's really fought in a while. Both of them really coming off losses to guys not even in the UFC anymore. But that's where my top 10 would stand. It does stand for the light heavyweight division. Sorry about that. For the light heavyweight division, that's where I would stand with that. I think, this fight, and this is the fight I'm going to start with, actually, is the Ozdemir versus Misha Serkinov. Now, the reason why I'm starting with this fight, and it's the co-main, and I'm gonna just kind of jump a little bit back and forth, I guess you can say. I'm gonna jump from the co-main to the main. Give you my two predictions on that. Then I'm gonna work my way rest of the way down the card. If this messes any of you up, then I do apologize sincerely. Sincerely, not really. Just handle it, because it doesn't really matter in what order I do these fights. It just matters that I'm doing these fights. So this fight tomorrow, as you're seeing up on the screen, is just I'm so excited for this fight, man. I really am just super duper excited for this fight, and I'm having a little technical problem bringing some things up, and I don't think I think this can steal the show. I think that Serkinov is actually being a little bit underrated, being that where he is standing here on in the rankings. You know, Ozdemir is a beast as well. He had a great showing in his first fight. Okay, but I gotta tell you, man, Misha Serkinov is a absolute beast. He's been tearing through everyone. Basically, everyone that he has fought, he is tearing through them. I do not know why he's not ranked higher with these, with some of these in this ranking system. But I really got to tell you that when I was looking at these rankings, throughout the week and the other day, I was really I had to tell you, I was pretty much disappointed, and I was pretty much disappointed because, Serkinov has not lost in the UFC. Okay, he is 4-0. And he's beating Nikita Krylov was his last victory. That was in December. Hasn't fought since then. But that was a first-round guillotine. He also triangled Ian Cortadiba, Alex Nicholson, another neck crank, and Daniel Jolly, TKO. So he's finished all 4 of his fights in the UFC. And not trying to take away anything from Ozdemir. Okay, Ozdemir has 9 KOs and 13 professional wins from Switzerland. Okay, his one professional loss was actually in Bellator, and he was submitted by Kelly Arundison. All right, Oven St. Preux, he had the split decision win over him in February. That was his first fight in the UFC. So, he's been around a little bit. He's obviously a big guy. He's both these guys are big guys, and they look like they're going to really look to throw down. 2 serious guys, man. 2 serious guys. But I got to tell you, man, I'm kind of liking Serkinov in this fight. He just doesn't look like anything gets to him, and I really, if I got to pick someone, I'm going to pick him. He's 4-0. I think he's one of the up-and-comers in this division, and I think when we get when the smoke clears tomorrow afternoon, afternoon, that Serkinov's going to come away with this victory, and this is going to jump him up in the rankings, and nobody's going to want to fight him. Not Jimmy Manawa, not anyone. When you got guys like that are kind of talking, and they're talking about what they deserve and what they don't deserve. It's gonna be very interesting. So we will see, kind of how it all breaks down. I'm really looking forward obviously, to this next fight I'm about to talk about, which obviously is going to be the main event. Gustafsson versus Teixeira, number 1 and number 2 light heavyweights in the world. That's by rankings, right now. Of course, we got Daniel Cormier and John Jones. They're going to be fighting. They're going to be fighting in the end of July in Anaheim, and that should be a great fight. It'll definitely tell us a lot about, where everything's going to shake out, who's going to fight who next, and it'll definitely should be fun. And I can't wait. Cannot wait for that fight. As of Gustafsson and Teixeira tomorrow. Now these guys definitely have a couple common opponents. They've both fought and lost to Daniel Cormier. They've both fought and lost. I'm sorry. They've not both fought and lost to Daniel Cormier. My mistake. They've both fought and lost to Anthony Johnson, obviously. And they've both fought and lost to John Jones. Now, Alexander's actually, if you look at his last, since he last beat Shogun, which was December 2012, that's going on 5 years. He had fought John Jones after that, and his first fight after that was John Jones, and that was in September 2013. So it's a very long time in between fights, and he had a great showing versus John. A lot of people thought he won that fight. I was not one of those people. I thought Jones won that fight. But he came back. He didn't fight for a long time after that. He didn't fight until March 2014. It's a decent amount of time off. And he ended up fighting Jimmy Manawa, who he now trains with and is training partners. And I know he did corner Manawa in his last fight, and they've become pretty good friends, really good friends. So pretty crazy. Then he lost to Anthony Johnson. That was a brutal knockout to Anthony Johnson. Just totally a brutal knockout to Anthony Johnson. Then he got a title shot versus Daniel Cormier, basically. And you got to say it was probably from his last win against Manawa. But my whole point to bringing up these last 4 fights with Alexander is Alexander, since the Shogun Hua fight almost 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago, is 2-3. He's 2-3. Obviously, 2 of those. He's obviously all those fights are against the top guys, the best guys. The only guy he has not fought that's basically, I think, been in this top 4 or 5 for most of this time is the man he's fighting tomorrow, Glover Teixeira. And we're going to get into Glover in a second. But, Alexander had fought, Blachowicz, Jan Blachowicz. If I'm not saying that right, I'm sorry. But he, Blachowicz was pretty decent, but he's actually gone on a little bit of a dip down a little bit. Hasn't been doing too well. And, it's crazy that this guy has really not won that many fights, but he's taken some time. He's taken some time off, between a lot of those fights. Gave Daniel Cormier a run for his money in those, split decision. Almost beat Daniel Cormier. Like, where would he be if he did? Excuse me. Okay. But now, I want to get into Glover. I want to talk about Glover real quick. talk about Mr. Teixeira, and not Mark Teixeira, the former Yankee, Texas Ranger, and Atlanta Brave. We're talking about Glover Teixeira, the 37-year-old, 6'2", 205-pound light heavyweight, ranked number 2 in the world. Glover Teixeira. Now, you really gotta you look at Glover, and Glover's actually won 4 of his last 5. He lost to John Jones. This was back in 2014. Now, he's obviously and actually, you can see, been way more active than Alexander has. And Alexander's been through some wars. So for him taking some time off in between and different and things, I can't really blame him. He gets to fight a lot in his home country because MMA is big there. UFC makes a lot of money there, and you know he gets a lot of fights in Sweden. Glover coming off a win over Jared Cantonier. Last loss before that was to Anthony Johnson by KO. If you don't remember that was an uppercut, 13 seconds. Anthony Johnson's just a scary man. He's just a scary man. But, you know, before that, basically, Glover did something like that real similar to Rashad, Patrick Cummings, and Ovince St. Preux. He finished all 3 of those guys. Rear naked choke, TKO, KO, and then that loss. Played it pretty safe for his Cannonier. I think he played it safe for his Cannonier because he didn't know too much about him. Probably knew, the guy was pretty strong. Probably didn't want to, risk, especially coming off a knockout. Taking, only not taking that much. He didn't take. I don't feel he took as much time off as what he probably should have after that Anthony Johnson knockout. So he did kind of seem like he played it a little safe for his Cannonier, but I'm not criticizing Glover, saying that he when I say he played it safe, he played it safe. He didn't try and sit there and bang with the guy. I mean, he didn't even, which he probably could have. And I thought he fought a really good fight. So don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing Glover at all. I like Glover. I'm actually going to pick Glover in this fight. Pretty much because I think Glover has some power. I think he's got great stand-up to get inside. I think the Gustafsson kicks. I think if he can keep him at range with his kicks, he can probably do well. But I think that would also bring down and some takedowns. Now that's where the interesting comes into it. Alexander's been so well-rounded, and just his skills have become so much better as he's been in the UFC. Obviously we all know it took Glover a long time to get into the UFC with his visa problems and whatnot. But, if you look at guys that he's fought, and I mean, you make a certain mistake against Glover, and he's gonna end it. And I'm not sure if Gustafsson. I think Gustafsson could be taking him a little lightly, as crazy as that might sound. He's used to fighting at home. He's lost a fight there to Anthony Johnson. These things happen. There has to be some more underlying issues. Like I said, he since in less than 5 years, he's fought like 4 times. And in between that span, and this could be a good thing or a bad thing, but basically in between that span, that's when Glover was making his actual UFC debut, May of 2012. So, I mean, just a little bit before, Alexander was beating Shogun in the middle of this crazy winning streak that he was on. Glover was, just made his UFC debut. Actually, had fought twice, had beaten Kyle Kingsbury and Fabio Maldonado in 2012 when he made his debut, UFC 146 and UFC 153. Obviously went on and had some really good matchups. Beat Quentin Rampage Jackson, and we all know that was a great fight. We all know how crazy, awesome Rampage is. And, James Tahuna, Ryan Bader finished both of those guys. That's what got him the title shot versus Jones. Might it have been a little early? Possibly. Came off a loss, losing to Phil Davis after that. I mean, Phil Davis can make anybody look bad. Over the same proof patch like I went over before. I mean, Teixeira's got some great wins, and I'm going to go with him in this fight. He's just been so much more active, man. I don't think that's so much a bad thing. I mean, he might have been able to shake off, from that knockout to Anthony Johnson by now. I know he did take some shots against Cannonier. It wasn't like he was sitting there scared of taking a shot with him. He just seemed to wrestle him a lot more than what he normally does. But that also could have been some practice there for him, But so I like in the main event. A lot of people might not like that. You might not agree. But that's who I'm going with. That's who we're going to go with here. So let's get on to the next fight. I don't want to ramble too much more about the main and the co-main. I just hope everybody enjoys this, some of the action. Sorry about that, people. On to the next fights. And we got some very interesting fights on the undercard. But the next fight I'm going to talk about here is Ben Saunders versus Peter Sabota. Saunders, man, he's been in this UFC here, man, for a long time. He's actually on a 2-fight winning streak. His last loss was to Patrick Cote, where he's TKO'd in the second round. We all know that, Ben Saunders is super, super duper well-rounded and fights, trains under the 10th Planet with Eddie Bravo. Last fight was a unanimous decision over Court McGee and armbarred Jacob Volkman. That was actually outside the UFC. It was probably the fight that he used to. That was actually the fight that he used to get himself back in the UFC. So good for him. Had some victories in Bellator and some losses. Actually, the loss in Bellator was to their current champion Douglas Lima. We all know how talented Douglas Lima is. So Sabota is 16-5-1 as opposed to Sanders 21-7-2. Sabota is fighting out of Germany. If you don't know that already, he is actually 3-1 in the UFC. Only lost to Kyle Noak, where he was TKO'd in the first round on that Rousey home card. We all remember that card, right? Holy cow. What happened to Ronda? And I guess no help me Ronda, right? Anyway, this should be a pretty interesting card, but I'm going to take Ben Saunders here by submission. I like Ben Saunders in this, and that's who I think I'm going to go with. Sabota's been TKO'd and he's been submitted, but that's not to say that, that can't happen again. So this should definitely be a pretty good fight, but I also won't be surprised if it went the distance. So you never know. It's tough to take some of these guys that have to cross the pond over there to get in there, and the travel and everything, it becomes a lot different. So our next fight is going to be contested in the 170-pound division. Abdul Razak Hassan versus Omari Akhmedov. Now, Hassan has made his UFC debut back in November, beat Charlie Ward, and not the Charlie Ward they played for Florida State. I'm talking about the Charlie Ward, 170-pound Charlie Ward, who was KO'd in 53 seconds to Abdul Razak Al Hassan. If I said that wrong, I'm sorry. You have 3 names. I probably got at least one of them right. So 1 for 3 isn't bad. That's, batting 333. If I was a major league hitter batting 333, if I got at least one of your names right, Abdul, I know I hit that on the right. Razik, Al Hassan. If I got at least one of those right, man, that means I am batting 333, and that's damn good. So thank you very much. His opponent, Omari Akhmedov. I'm killing some of these names, man. I do have to apologize. But Omari Akhmedov, the Wolverine, the Russian, Dagestani, the Bull, I believe they were calling him. This should be a pretty interesting fight. This guy has a victory over Noak. 2 losses, though, in the UFC. He's actually got 6 fights in the UFC. 7. Holy cow. This guy has a lot of fights in the UFC. I didn't realize that. Did not realize that at all. It's a lot of fights. He's lost to Gunnar Nelson, where he's guillotine choked. He has a win over Brian Ebersol, but that was like through a knee injury. So I think that was probably when Ebersol was cutting down the weight. He probably shouldn't have. Lost to Sergio Moraes by TKO. So fought on the Teixeira Evans card versus Colin Oak. This is pretty interesting. This guy's been pretty much up and down since he's been in the UFC. Omari. I'm gonna have to go with Abdul on this. Going down. This is definitely a pretty interesting fight card. But in the 170-pound division, man, this could jumpstart Mr. Abdul here into, I wouldn't say into the top, 10 or 15. Obviously, that'd be idiotic. But I mean, an impressive win tomorrow, I think, could get him, another fight against someone that might be able to jumpstart him up in the rankings. So we will see. It's not that the 170-pound division is dormant, obviously, by no means. It's pretty exciting, and it's also pretty deep. Not as deep as the UFC's 155, or, the 155 is just amazing. I mean, you can just name 15 guys in the 155-pound division. They're just, killers. So, but to get back to here, I'm going to go definitely with Abdul in this one. Omar is just very inconsistent, and I know Abdul's a striker, and he's been super, super impressive in all his fights. So we'll see how that, how everything definitely kind of evens out after that. The next fight is Emil Meek versus Nordine Taleb, I'm sorry. Emil Meek pulled out. I don't know what they got over there and why they got this, but it's Oliver Enkamp against Nordine Taleb. Now, we're going to start with Enkamp. I know you see up on the screen there, I got some pictures of what happened today at the weigh-ins. I'm going to get into Reza Madadi and his fight against Silva. Madadi and the Silva in the fight, and I got some of the Octagon girls up there, so you guys can catch that. I thought that was a great pick, so I wanted to get that in there. And it looks like I'm looking down at them. And believe me, it's very impressive. Very impressed by the Octagon girls always. But Oliver Enkamp is an undefeated kid from Sweden. Making his UFC debut. He has 7 fights, 4 submissions, 1 KO, TKO. And, fighting in 170 pounds just definitely should be pretty interesting. Did win by TKO in his last fight. In the Superior Challenge 15 in Stockholm, which looks like he's fought there the last couple times. So this should be pretty interesting. I know it's a late replacement. Nordine Taleb is a former Ultimate Fighter. I believe it was Ultimate Fighter Canada versus Australia, I believe that was. And he's the guy that'll fight anybody. His last loss is coming off against Santiago Ponzinibbio, who a lot of people are super, super duper high on. He KO'd Eric Silva. Of course, Eric Silva's a little bit beaten up, has been KO'd and taken out by a lot of people by now. Over this amount of time. Lost to Worley Alves. Beat Chris Clements. Fought Zhang Lang Li. Fought over there on that Philippine card. So he's a 4-2 in the UFC. This is going to be obviously the biggest test of young Oliver Enkamp's career, and this definitely should be pretty tough for him. And he should not take Oliver Enkamp lightly. But I'm going to go with Talib. I think Taleb's experience is going to weigh this out. And I've never seen this Enkamp fight, but no matter what, I know he's going to want to avenge that loss to Ponzinibbio. So that's going to be pretty interesting fight. So I'm going to go with Taleb on this. Former tough Canada. Wow, so many fights on this card, but a lot of good fights, man. Can't wait. Jack Hermanson versus Alex Nicholson. And another I'm kind of surprised that this is on the main card, but you're gonna definitely thrown a couple other fights in there. There's definitely some popular guys like Razor Madadi and whatnot, but Jack Hermanson, the Joker, another fighter out of Sweden. He's coming off a loss to Cesar Ferreira. He's 1-1 in the UFC. Has 8 KOs in his 14 wins, 4 submissions. Has never been KO'd. It's been submitted twice, so we'll see how that goes. This fight's going to be contested at 185 pounds. Alex Nicholson, who is 7-3, obviously a little bit less experience in those fights. An American top team fighter, is a big 185 pounder, coming in at 6'4". He's also coming off a loss to Smiling Sam Alvey. Is actually 1-2 in the UFC. Is a loss to Misha Serkinov. So this kid looks like he's coming down from 205 to 185, and should actually be pretty interesting. Lost by neck crank to Serkinov. Came back and KO'd Devin Clark, and then lost to Sam Alvey. I believe that was probably in his 185-pound debut. So, gotta think about that for a minute. I'm going to go with Nicholson in this. I think he's going to try to get his first win there at 185 pounds. And I'm going to definitely go with him in this fight. Hermanson is coming off that submission loss. He does have a win. He's fought in that Venator FC, which is that same promotion that Emil Meek and I believe Luke Barnett fought in that as well. And that's where we also seen Emil Meek take out Husamar. I'm the dirtiest FUCK in MMA. So that was a great thing when he took him out. You definitely had to give him some props on that, man, for sure. All right, now let me bring up the rest of this card here. This is moving on to the prelims on Fox Sports 1, which starts at 11 a.m. Now, that's going to be the premier fight on this card is Pedro Munoz versus Damian Stasiak. Now, Stasios fighting, I believe this is his 3rd UFC fight. Hold on, let's bring that up. I'm not working off any notes here. I'm just trying to go off my tablets in front of me. Oh, yeah, by the way, this is a bantamweight fight. Yeah. So yeah, he's 3 UFC fights exactly. Yes, and he's 2-1. Lost his debut, won his last 2 fights, by both by submission, rear naked choke, and armbar. So is this kid is a pretty exciting fighter from Poland. Worked off some of those jitters, and there's a lot of wins by submission here. Pedro Munoz, who is 13-2. Obviously fighting out of Brazil, has a few more fights in the UFC than his opponent. He's a loss to a Sun Sao in his debut. One against Matt Harbour, then a no contest. I'm not sure why that was overturned. We can look into that. Another loss to Jimmy Rivera. But he's on a 2-fight winning streak since that loss to Jimmy Rivera, finishing both his opponents by guillotine choke. One of them being Justin Scroggins. So this fight is being, like I said, contested at 135 pounds. And we will kind of see how it goes. This Munoz has never been submitted or TKO'd in his fighting career. Both those losses were decisions, like I said, one to Jimmy Rivera, one to a Sun Sao. So if Stasiak can actually beat this kid, it would actually be a pretty good feather in his cap, considering his only 2 losses are against 2 of the top 5 bantamweights in the world, 2 guys that are ranked in the top 5. Sorry, that being Sun Sao and Jimmy Rivera. So definitely see how that goes, see how that works out. Sorry, I just had to take quite a much deep breath, having a little issue there. It's gonna be a tough fight, man. It's definitely gonna be a tough fight. I'm gonna have some weird picks, man. So I'm gonna go with Stasiak in this pick with this fight. Never seen him fight. I know I've seen Munoz fight. If I go back and really think about it. And like I said, this could be a huge feather, man. A huge feather in his cap if he can beat Munoz, because it seems like Munoz has done pretty well against everyone except for those upper echelon guys. So Munoz could actually be a stepping stone here. As much as I really hate to say that, but it could be true. But we're gonna go Stasiak in this one, and I think it's gonna be a decision. Actually, I don't see this fight being finished. Either way, because both these guys are tough. Now, getting to some more interesting. Chris Camozzi versus Trevor Hot Sauce Smith. Camozzi, I like Camozzi a lot. Fights out of Colorado. Unfortunately, Chris is coming off 2 losses in a row. He's had a pretty good stretch at one time in the UFC. He's won 3 in a row before this current 2-fight losing streak. In between that, he did lose 4 in a row. Did not get caught. He has so many fights here in the UFC. I can't even count. But if they did have a time when he won 5 out of 6, his only loss coming to Jacare, which I think he took that fight up maybe on a short notice. He did leave the UFC for a minute, won 2 in a row, and then came back. So he did get caught, after that 4-fight losing streak, but did work his way back. Had a 4-fight winning streak at one point some time back. I actually did see him fight live at 137 in his loss to Francis Carmon, back in 2011. So that was a long time ago. Also, his loss to Jesse Taylor. You never know. I mean, this is Camozzi comes a fight, man. He comes a fight every time. You just don't. He'll fight anybody, anywhere, and that's the true mark of a great fighter. So I don't think as much as I'd like to pick him in this fight, I might have to go with Trevor Smith in this. Computer's moving a little slow. that. Okay, there we go. Hot Sauce Smith. Mr. Hot Sauce here, coming off a decision loss to Sanchez, has a loss by KO to Cal Magalhães, is beaten Tortrung. Also lost to Tialis Leites, Ed Herman, Tim Kennedy. Has some pretty big losses in the UFC. Lost to Jan Vellante in Strikeforce. This could be a pretty interesting 3-round fight. This is definitely going to go 3 rounds. I'm going to go with Trevor Smith in this. I think this is his fight. I think this is his kind of fight. I think that he's a big imposing guy, and sometimes it's tough to, you never know sometimes what you might get out of Chris Camozzi. Well, I like Chris a lot, and I think he's a great fighter, but I just do wonder some fights what Chris might show up, man. So, but the fight I've been wanting to talk about all night, the one we've been waiting for, Razor Madadi versus Joaquim Silva. Now, as you can see the picture on the screen, going into this weigh-in, Madadi weighs in, and he just rushed off the scale like you wouldn't believe, man. Rushed off the scale like, oh my God. Could not believe it. But they caught him, man. It was almost like if they were ready for it, and then you had them getting in between, as you can see in the picture. Definitely got me pumped. Definitely got me really pumped up for this fight. Madadi, they were saying during the weigh-in broadcast, probably could be his last fight. Just due on that fact alone, being that Silva is undefeated, I think Madadi's just playing some serious head games with him. Madadi's basically alternated wins and losses over the last few years. Let's come back to the UFC. His last loss was to Duffy, Joseph Duffy, by unanimous decision. Silva here is 2-0 in the UFC. He's got his last win was a KO. First round, 34 seconds to Andrew Holbrook. Very, very impressive. This fight is at 155 pounds. This kid, if this kid could beat Razor Madadi, who has wins over guys the likes of Michael Johnson, and this could be very, very interesting for this kid. Can put himself right into some of that top, upper echelons of the division. It's such a tough division to crack, the 155. You need a very impressive win over a guy like Razor Madadi and see how that'll help him move up, in the rankings. But I have to say, I really do think he was really trying to get into his head. And I think he did if you look at Silva's reaction. So I'm going to go with Silva, though, in this. I'm going to go with the kid. I think I foresee this kid going pretty far. It's a tough division. We'll see how he fares against Madadi. But I think he'll do pretty well against him. Now we're going to get to the Fight Pass Prelims, and going to start wrapping it up in a few more minutes. I wanted to keep this under an hour, so we're about 49 minutes right now. I'm going to go through the first 3 fights on the Fight Pass, which is Desmir Hazovic and Marcin Held. Held, who obviously fought in Bellator for a long time, finally fighting in the UFC, was very impressive. Had so successful. Wins over Dave Jansen. Had a loss to Will Brooks. Was beaten Patrick Pitbull. Wins over Nate Jolly. I mean, the list goes on in Bellator. He fought there for such a long time. Very, very, very good fighter. I only think the only reason, though, coming off those 2 losses, that he's there right now, still in the UFC, is because he does have a big European following, such as for fights like this. But this, you can obviously say, and you obviously know, Marcin Held, this is your last chance, my friend. You lose this fight, you're going to be fighting on those smaller shows, man, to see if you can build yourself back up in there. He is 22-6. He is such a young kid, man, at 25, and he's been fighting. Seems like he fought forever in Bellator. So we'll see how this goes. He has 12 submission wins to his credit. He'd been submitted one time. Like I said, that was a long time ago. Split decision loss to Joe Lozon in his last fight. Unanimous decision loss to Diego Sanchez in his UFC debut. He is fighting Desmir Hazdovic. And this kid, Demir, not the fight I was looking for, people. This, of course, is the opening fight. I'm so curious to see how this goes. They both made weight. Actually, this fight, there's one more fight on the Fight Pass. It's not on Fight Pass. But I'm going to take Held in this fight. I think Held will get his first win. I think he might even get this first win by submission. So if that is to happen, good for him. Demir, I do want to get in his record there because it was a little bit interesting. Both these guys seem like they're probably fighting for their collective jobs, if you seriously think about it. So we have a couple welterweight fights left. One who missed weight, Darren Till, like I said, came in here at 176, fighting Justin Aon, who if I was Justin, I would be absolutely pissed, especially after that stare down. It almost seemed like Till was trying to kiss him. Demir lost his UFC debut to Mirabek to Samsonov. He was KO'd in the first round. This is back a year ago, so this is his first fight back in a year. I don't know how this might go for him if he decides to lose this fight. There's the Bosnian Bomber. It's not such a great name to have, I guess, when you consider yourself Bosnian. But this should be an interesting fight. I'm going to go with Held in this. I'm going to go with Held. I think he's due for his first UFC win. So that's your first fight on UFC Fight Pass, starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's what we are here in the 203. Once again, if you're just joining me, thank you you can rewind back. A little preview and predictions of tomorrow's UFC Fight Night 109. Glover Teixeira versus Alexander Gustafsson. Two of the top light heavyweights in the world. Not many fighters in that weight class better than these two gentlemen. Fighting tomorrow in the co-main event, Misha Serkinov fighting Volkan Ozdemir, two of the top. So in this fight, we have 4 of the top 10 light heavyweights in the world. Do not miss it. It is on FS1. 1 p.m. the main card starts. 11 p.m. the prelims. 9 a.m. the Fight Pass prelims. And speaking of the Fight Pass prelims, we have one more fight to talk about. That's Jason Ayari versus Darren Till, the German fighter here, who is undefeated at 1-0 in the UFC, is on an impressive 7-fight winning streak. Had won 6 in a row coming in, won his UFC debut by split decision over Jim Wallhead. Fighting Darren Till, who is 13-0-1 and missed weight by a lot. Okay. Came in super heavy, this kid from England. Last fight was a draw to Dalby, a majority draw. This is his third fight in UFC. He's 1-0-1. Last fought UFC Fight Night 67, the Condit Alves, where he defeated Wendell de Oliveira Marquez. I'm going to go with Till in this, unfortunately. He's coming in a lot bigger. I think that's going to probably take the factor in the fight. I don't know if he gets 20% of his show and win, or it's just his show money. Unfortunately, it's probably not that much to where it's going to offset this loss that I already might take. So, few more minutes left. Like I said, trying to keep this baby under an hour. Trying to keep so your attention spans can stay locked into this preview and prediction show here on the 203 Fight Network. UFC Fight Night 109. Alexander Gustafsson, Glover Teixeira, live tomorrow, free on FS1. Starting at 1 p.m., the main card. I just said that a few minutes ago. I needed to let you all know that again. There is one more fight on the FS1 prelims, and that is Nico Musake. If I got that wrong, I know I got your first name right, buddy. He is fighting out of Sweden. 13-4, this welterweight fight against Borjan Vakhilcevic. Okay. Nico's coming off a loss to Albert Tumenev. Nico has 3 wins in the UFC. He is 3-2. Coming off a loss, unanimous decision to Albert Tumenev. This was back in January of 2015. Has not fought in the UFC in close to 2 years. Borjan Vakhilcevic. Now, I might be 0 for 2 on that name, pal. And if I am, I'm sorry. If I got that wrong, why don't you all hit that like button or dislike button or leave something in the comments. Just do something. This man is 1-1-1 in the UFC. His last loss, the Waterson-Van Zandt fight, that was back in December. Lost split decision to Sultan Alvev. This is a tough fight to pick, man. It really is. Nico hasn't fought in a while. Borjan's coming off a loss and a draw. Actually hasn't had has fought a few times. Fought a lot in 2016. I'm going to go with the guy, I can't say his name. Velkovic. Think I got that one right. But there's not too much to say about this fight. Not too much I could say about it. But I do know that I am very excited for tomorrow, very excited for the fights. Stay tuned for my live review and recap of the fights. The UFC Fight Night 109, Glover Teixeira, Alexander Gustafsson, Misha Serkinov versus Volkan Ozdemir in the co-main event. Ben Saunders, Peter Sabata. Those are your 3 premier fights tomorrow. Fight Pass prelims starting at 9 a.m. Please join me tomorrow, like I said, after the fights. I'm going to give you about a recap. Hopefully keep that under an hour. I'm also going to talk about a little bit more about the UFC women's featherweight division, what might happen there. I'm going to talk a little bit more tomorrow during the review about TJ Dillashaw, Demetrius Johnson. Is that fight going to happen? Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather. September. That's happening in September, people. Like it or not. Boxing people aren't happy about it. We don't care. I don't care. You don't care. But I do care about one thing. If you like the video, please hit that like button. Leave a comment. If you watched this video and you made it all the way through, I'm not really looking at the stats right now, but I do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And once again, join me tomorrow after the fights. Mark G here, 203 Fight Network, live stream. Out.